Good morning and good afternoon. This is Sandy Masters, your host, and today we welcome back to site Brian Chapman, founder of thechapmanalliance.com. Reading his tagline, "Passionate about innovative learning," is quite the understatement. We reconnected in a webinar promoting Training Magazine's online conference. Brian will be hosting the Learning Design Challenge Awards for Outstanding Design in Mobile, Social Collaborative, Microlearning, Analytics, Gamification, motivation, and engagement. Let me go ahead and just change presenter control to Brian. And some of you who have been to that conference may remember the shootouts over the years where Brian was the master of ceremonies. We are fortunate to have him join us today to help us understand the ever-changing learning ecosystem. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, glad to be here today, and good to talk to all of you, and glad to have you join us on this early morning. As Sandra mentioned, I'm Brian Chapman. I really do enjoy optimizing learning in any possible way. So I think we're just going to jump into today's session and just talk a little bit here if we could. We're going to start with a question to all of you, and I want you to consider this question very deeply and really listen to the intent of the question. Have you completed an e-learning or ILT course in the last 2 weeks? So Sandra's going to open a poll. It's over on the panel where the questions appear.
And we've got 44 people on the call. I want to get 100% participation. I don't think I've ever gotten 100% participation, and I want it now. So on the screen, just click yes or no. Have you completed an e-learning or ILT course in the last 2 weeks? No multitasking, focused energy. We're up to 89%, 91. Come on, help me out. If you haven't voted, let's get to 95. Last chance.
And Sandra, could you make me an organizer too? I'm not seeing the poll right now.
Absolutely. Let me do that for you. Okay, so we got 95% to vote, and 60% of you said you have, and 40% said you have not. So let me hide that.
Hey, that's excellent. And so in a group of trainers, this is something that might be expected, but it's great. 60% of you said yes, 40% said no. Now I want you to, we're going to go to the next question, and I want you to see how the question changes slightly in nature, but has an interesting meaning. Have you learned something online in the last 2 weeks, as opposed to having gone out and completed a class or an ILT session?
And this is audience participation, so click yes or no on the screen. Last time we got 93% to vote. Let's see if we can get to 95. Everyone, focus, back to us. We're at 80.
Yeah, very good. Good thing you're voting here. I hope, and you're seeing real time here, you know, how that's really changing, the difference between those two questions.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Whoa.
Big difference. 88% yes, 13% no. Now, when we do this kind of similar questioning in a group of folks who are not necessarily trainers or in the learning professionals, but happen to be more of just the regular learner role, often we'll see the numbers less than 60%, even down to 20 or 10%. And then the flip is almost immediately to the 100, almost to 100% on the side of, have you learned something online? Well, just, you know, carefully think about this for a minute. Consider, what's the difference between those two questions? Completed a course, learned something, and I think it tells a lot about what we do. I think, you know, a lot of us, if you had a chance to ask, or maybe you could even type in the question section so others can see, but what was that way that you went to go and learn something? Is it something you sought out? Is it something that just happened? Is it an interaction with someone else? For many folks, the number one answer that comes up is, I went on YouTube and I needed to do a specific task. And it may have had nothing to do with my job, or it may have had everything to do with my job. Just last night, I went out and looked up some things about creating online data collection forms and having them route to Google Docs. And so I learned that last night. And that's a typical way of learning. And I think what we want to do is say, how do we apply that on the job in our learning profession? And I'm going to talk about the concept first, then switch quickly to the reality. Okay, so I mean, this is the basic concept. 70% of what we learn, and this is not a statistically research-driven data item that 70, 20, 10 just exists in some mystical universe. It's more like an ideal. It's a goal to shoot for. And but 10% is that structured formal learning, and that's our classrooms, our even virtual classroom e-learning that's been created for a specific purpose and an objective. 20% that we learn from other people, mentor-based, and just really connecting with others. And 70% is that informal, social learning that it just happens. It just happens over time. It's said about even, you doing peer-to-peer connections here on this site. It's a great way to learn, but also, make those formalized networks. Now let's look at the reality for a minute. I like this. This comes from a Xyleme infographic. It says, remember the 70-20-10 framework? And again, it is just that. It's a framework. And there are people who dedicate their whole careers to talking about 70-20-10. But go to the right-hand side, and you'll see it says the current reality looks more like this. Now, this is a poll of folks like us, learning professionals, trainers, and basically it says that we kind of focus, and we sort of see things being a little different. 43% of what we do is that formal learning. 14% informal, social, collaborative, peer-to-peer. That's a pretty significant drop. And then 43% of on-the-job activities. And this is data that came from a Brandon Hall research study, but they were trying to ask the question. It doesn't quite align to the 70-20-10 that I described, but it gives you an idea. It says that upwards of just about half of what we do is structured learning. And I guess the question is that always the best approach? And remember, structured learning focuses around these organized activities where content is self-contained within a framework of saying, we're going to go into a classroom, we're going to spend 2 days, we're going to spend, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks, we're going to go into a classroom and we're going to put everything in there, everything that we learn, do, and need to know around a specific set of objectives. Now, that's important to understand, because as we start to talk about micro-learning, for example, and the way that some of the shifts are occurring in the way that blended learning is delivered, it's not just in one big bucket, 1 2-week course. E-learning is the same way. I've been an e-learning developer for several parts of my career, creating 210 hours of courseware for the Air Force. And I know we packed everything we could in that because it was our only exchange with the learner. Well, the world is changing. It's not like that anymore. It's hard to package it all into one big container, especially if you're very interested in having people remember what they did and apply what they learned in the classroom or the virtual classroom. So some of these techniques that we're going to talk about apply not only, it has to do with extending the classroom, extending the learning experience and going outward. Now, I put it together in this kind of chart here because I always, I think a little bit more, okay, that's a great concept, but what do we do with it? What are the tools or the things that we have available to us to make that work? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the 10%, the instructor-led training, virtual classroom, the e-learning. Even I added another bullet there as hands-on learning, which is a very key, critical way for people to learn, and that can be part of a structured experience. I work with an airline, for example, WestJet Airline, and they do have things that they have to do that are very, you have to physically demonstrate your ability to blah, and that's an important part of structured learning. But what I want to do is focus on some of these things that tend to be, we noticed in the reality statement that it was people doing less of this. Remember, it was more of a 14% effort from the learning and learning professional side to actually support some of these other areas, like social, like collaborative, like informal or just in time. So how do we handle things like connecting socially, group discussions, mentoring and coaching that occurs maybe more outside of the structured environment, handling procedure guides, knowledge base, job aids. What a great way, to learn something very quickly. And sometimes we overlook that with one fell swoop because, we want to make sure we teach something in the classroom that's going to stay permanently ingrained in our experience forevermore, and that may not be as practical as we think. And what's interesting about that is we have technologies to help us do that. Now, I come from the old days of e-learning, before it was even called e-learning, and maybe some of you have do as well. Have been around training for a long, long time. Remembering back to the days when a company would get a learning management system, and the learning management system was really capable of helping us post our e-learning, schedule classroom sessions, what have you. But the world has changed in terms of technology, and I don't want to get really myopic with just looking at the phrase technology, because I talk about the learning ecosystem as being three parts. It's people, processes, and technology, and how they intersect. And so when I help groups and go in and work on their optimization strategies, we really look at that. So I am kind of showing a little bit about technology here, but I want to let you know that I think much further beyond that. But so instead of just having the learning management system, and maybe by raise of hands, and you could use that hand raising button, hands out, how many of you have a learning management system in place?
Raise your hand if you have a learning management system. We get a little tally here. Yeah, hey, I love it when the attentiveness score goes up when we ask a question.
I see lots of hands there too, yeah.
64, 66%, and that keeps on going up. 68% have a 71%. Okay, so
it's calculating across the entire audience. Okay, now clear the hands, Sandra, and let's try something like this. How many of you have a designated channel in place for posting informal learning, or ways that people can interact with content that's created for use just at any time, any place? Now, again, I only want you to raise your hand if you have a designated channel in your organization for that. Go ahead and do some hand raising.
Would that be like a SharePoint or something? Where
it could be. It could be. So I'm open to some of these, some of these things, but I'm looking for it. You may have it associated with a specific course.
Mm-hmm.
So in my course, I put resource files. That's okay. That's good. But do you have a place where your learners in your organization, they actually know that's our place where we share content? And so I'll leave it kind of open and loose, and let's see what the percentage looks like there.
So it's hovering at around 44%.
Okay, that's good. And yeah, I think this is better. This was likely better. You can announce any changes that occur, but it's likely much better than we see in many places. In fact, in many places, we find that the informal learning is kind of rogue. It happens in little pockets all over the place, which is okay, and it's a good thing. But it's a delivery channel that we can cultivate and make more pronounced and understood. And so all of these pieces kind of fall into that area. And I'm going to talk about kind of 5 major areas, and they just happen coincidentally, wink, wink, to correspond with the program that we're doing at Online Learning Conference that Sandra mentioned. These are the categories that we're actually looking for best practices. And the reason we're doing that, the reason we're doing this competition isn't just to say, hey, look at me, look at what we're doing. It's that we really want the industry to learn more about how they can really push the envelope in these areas, and that's micro-learning, mobile, using mobile. Now, mobile, I have it out there, and it's using mobile at the right time and for the right purpose. I'm going to share with you some best practices that we've seen, what people are asking for, what they're wanting to do. Social, analytics, and gamification. These are areas that are misunderstood and have a lot more, we have infrastructures in place to actually do more of this than we think. Now, this slide is designed to be shock and awe and overwhelming, so look at it that way. But here's what happens is the technologies that are out there, we have them every one of our organizations has these wired different ways. A whole bunch of you said you have learning management systems. Some of you have a designated place for informal. Some of you have, you're using virtual classroom technologies, using social learning as a part of the technology infrastructure. But what it creates is kind of an overwhelming array of options, and it's not right. So don't get too overwhelmed, even though this is a shock and awe slide. What happens is you can focus on some of the simplicity of what is there. So I'm going to kind of just transition to these items that I wanted to present to you today, because and the main message of this whole session is you can expand your delivery channels and think about ways to get outside and beyond simple classroom-based learning or e-learning and really enhance what you're doing. So I'm going to show you some examples. One major shift that's occurring out there is the advent of the flipped classroom. And Khan Academy is an example of that, but it's happening in a lot of places. I just saw that T-Mobile has made a major strategic shift in the way that their learning infrastructure is set up so that they support the flipped classroom. And these are techniques that even if you're a trainer, you can actually start to implement right away. But it's just the idea of allowing instructors to spend more time interacting with students rather than lecturing. When it comes down to it, it's as simple as that. And it's, you look at it as we all came from an academic model somewhere, whether it was high school or college or what have you. And this is what this structure looks like for learning. It's a lecture, and then we're actually do our homework or our problem statements in isolation, off on our own. And this is applied in corporate learning spaces very much so. It's sort of, I'm going to tell you something, and then I want you to go and figure out how to do it. Maybe you have to submit it, maybe you don't. But it's that academic model of lecture, homework, lecture, homework, final exam. The flipped classroom really kind of it is exactly what it says. It flips everything on its ear. If you follow Khan and you've seen Khan before, you know that the lectures actually occur online. They're actually consumed by the learner at their own time and pace. There's no, in most cases, there's no real deadline for doing that, or no real time set for doing that. They actually go out and watch video. Okay, that seems pretty non-interactive for a classroom type environment. And then what happens is they get together and they work through the problem sets. And then the Khan Academy model would say you do all of that learning concepts and facts on your own. You come together to actually solve problems and work toward mastery. Now, how does that apply to a professional setting? There's another group that like site that I work with called CCIM. It's for professional commercial realtors, and they go through and they earn a CCIM credential. It's a certification that carries a lot of weight in the real estate industry. And they've done this model where what happens is they actually watch the lectures or the concepts in real time on their own. They get together and they actually do things like calculating, doing an economic analysis of a problem area to determine the real estate value. That's a silly example, but they've shifted their model where most of the time now is spent in groups and teams collaborating. These are often folks like in the insurance industry that are from independent providers representing a major brand in the real estate space, and so they have folks coming from all different sectors to actually work that through. The interesting thing about Khan, though, and this is where I wanted to point this out, is the learning, instead of just being a course, it's a course that has a fixed start date, fixed end date, whereas a huge monolithic e-learning course, it's a series of smaller modular content. And so what they're doing is actually watching the mastery at different levels. Now, this is a trigonometry course, and Khan is known as an academic provider. So you're going, what, Brian, why are you talking about Khan and academic models? I'll tell you, it's very interesting. Most companies I talk to now are very enamored with this Khan model for this very purpose. It's not just about being more academic by nature, but really dividing up the skill sets the things that they need to do, and looking at very modular ways to say, can we tell if the person has mastered this part of their overall skill set that they need to do their job well. And so this is the visual interface for Khan, but it's the concept that I want you to really focus on, the flipped model of presenting content and then consuming and then demonstrating ability. Now, I want to apply that to a more corporate setting because I think that'll help close the gap on it. This is a 3-tier flipped classroom model that's used by IBM, and I think the takeaways from here are, so if we have this large 2-week course that we do, how do we kind of divide things up and make them more modular and take advantage of the flipped classroom type approach? And if you look at these 3 concentric rings here, you've got the outer ring, and we'll call it, and then the middle ring, we'll call it, and then the center ring. Now, it is actually flipping the model completely, because IBM used to do all of their courses very instructor-led, instructor-focused, and then what they did was they started saying, let's divide the content when we design a course. Let's move to the outer ring some of the underlying things that they need to know before they can come into the middle ring, which is all about practice, about doing. So there's nothing in the middle ring that is about just we're gonna sit around and talk about something. We're actually going to do things. We're going to engage in simulations. Now, the simulations don't even have to be online. They could be more like a role play or something like that. Actually getting involved in case studies, like I mentioned with CCIM, on-the-job training tasks. And then the center ring is really critically important, because now we're going to get together and now we're going to share higher level cognitive abilities. We're going to share war stories about what works well, where we are, what doesn't work well. We're going to share inside tips and all of those. And that's where, again, you notice there was a real low sag on the 70-20-10 in the reality on social collaboration. That's where you want to focus your learners, on social collaboration. And this is based on instructional, really good instructional foundation. Because if you've ever heard of Bloom, and Bloom, is around 1950. It's a people may say, hey, this is from a long time ago. It's so right in tune with the way people learn that there are kind of brackets here. The first level that people learn at are knowledge and comprehension, and I call comprehension concepts. So we can learn the facts and concepts about things. We can learn how, the things that we need to remember for a knowledge-based test. But it doesn't go anywhere if we don't go to the next level, which is the application level, actually applying what we've learned. Then the top 3, I'm going to group them all into one big category: analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. This is, I would argue, this is where you become an expert in your craft. If you can perform to an application level, you're a good journeyman or apprentice. But if you really want to get to the next higher level, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation becomes key, because this is where we know what we really understand something to the point where we can change it up, make higher level assumptions about the way things need to go down. Okay, now I remapped all of Bloom to some of those things that we mentioned in the 70-20-10 map. So if we're teaching facts, hey, there's great reading. Now, I assume many of you use pre-reading. Oh, I want to go back 2 slides because you may have noticed a funny little thing here. I crossed out the word pre-reading. That's a lesson I learned a long time ago. And if you take one thing away from the session, whenever you're delivering a course, don't call it pre-reading.
Oh, no.
And I know, and a lot of us do. Here's why: when you use the word pre, it makes the assumption that it's optional. Okay, man, we could do this by raise of hands, and well, actually, we don't need to do it by raise of hands. You'll understand it completely. Have you ever given a pre-reading assignment, then shown up in the class and had half the people have not read the material? Mm-hmm. Yep, Sandra, you sounds like you know that personally. I have absolutely seen it several times. That a company will just go through this simple exercise of removing the word pre. They say the first part of this course is you start with a reading assignment. See how it's a really subtle, fundamental difference, but what a difference it makes. It's huge. So, are there any questions, Sandra? That you're watching the
Yeah,
question
well,
board?
what's interesting as you were talking about the flipped classroom, it made me think about learning styles. And Robin asks a great question: where do learning styles fit into this model? And what
Excellent.
if you're the person that really needs that structured instructor-led training, and you like the social aspect of it? How does that all fit into this?
Yeah, I think that works great. And I think what you can do is when you use good, true blended learning, you provide these resources, and not everyone's a reader. Some people want to see the video. Great
Mm-hmm.
case in point. I was riding on a shuttle bus from the hotel. I was going in to do some consulting work with WestJet Airlines, and so it was a group of trainees heading to a session. And I said, "What would you like to see changed about the learning here?" And they said, "Oh, we'd love to see more video. We want to see video showing how things are done, because that's the way
Mm-hmm.
we go out to YouTube and we learn that way." What you can do is actually, if you build content this way, or you build your courses this way, you can provide options. You can provide options that are based on learning styles. And then if you think about the flipped classroom model, you're getting together as a group and working through the problems together. That doesn't have to do with the learning styles as much as it does to do with application, but you can also get a feeling for your group that you're working with, if it's a cohort group, or that you know what their learning styles are all about. You can actually kind of help them because you are interacting with them more and lecturing to them less. That makes sense. But as you look across the spread here, you notice, this is again a chart that could be helpful. That 70-20-10 chart is helpful. You can say which of these channels are we drawing on? Are we doing group discussions? We're going to talk about that in the social section in just a moment here. That's where social fails. If you put a discussion group up for a class and say, here you go, it doesn't mean anything. But if you put it up with meaningful purpose, design, there's a purpose to meet. Like I was just meeting with a group that said we have these group sessions, these where the group gets together, analyzes a case study, considers several study questions, then they turn around and they submit their recommendation, and then finally they actually also have to make a presentation to the broader group. Now that's again where discussions, just you plug it in. It's a very simple plug-in. The design time, the focus is now on the case study and them producing something rather than having a lecture just saying, hey, here's how this case study works, and I'll interpret it for you, and so on and so forth. Now, okay, I'm switching to another part now. So that has to do with, these are different channels you can draw on. And again, that's the central theme. I want to switch now to just-in-time or informal. There's a study by McKinsey that says we spend 23% of our time on our jobs looking for information to help us do our jobs. And so this is another business case if you're starting to talk about informal, just-in-time, just enough help type systems. And remember, in those actuals that we saw from the Brandon Hall Research study, there was minimal time spent on that. Most of that 46% shifted up towards structured learning, which kind of de-emphasized the building informal learning, things that you can use on the job. So again, building those learning and training assets and resources out, making knowledge bases, ways for people to contribute, even the way we learn on YouTube. One of the tutorials I mentioned that I used last night was created by I think it was a 14-year-old kid, and you know what, I found value in it. He did the best job. There were several tutorial or how-tos on the same topic. His was the best. So
Wow.
you never know where it's going to come from.
I know.
But think about this again in your case study. If you're making that case for informal learning in your own organization, basically you basically can use some of this information. That we spend 1.8 hours a day finding information, and what we can do as trainers and learning professionals is help people find that information when they need it. Okay, here's a good case in point of it, a creative way that Home Depot did this. And I know it's, again, a little abstract from where we are, but it just drives the point home, and it's also going to set us up for talking about mobile and gamification. Okay, Home Depot. Well, let's look at their scenario here. They have 322,000 associates. Turnover rates are very high. They have 250,000 total products. And so they could bring those associates into classes and they could train them on products. But you can see how that would be a point of diminishing returns. They're not ever really going to get there. So what they've done is they've equipped their associates with mobile devices. Now, it's not just your regular mobile phone, but that can be used in a lot of session types of things that we do today. But when they're out on the floor and they have a little bit of downtime, now that's a funny word because I've never seen a Home Depot employee ever have downtime. They're always running around answering questions about something. But when they do have a little bit of downtime, or maybe they're assigned to do this, they can walk around to products on the shelf, actually scan the barcode. A bit of mobile learning, a modular piece of mobile learning is delivered right to the device. Now, it'd be cool if that was the end of the story, but it goes one step further. They are now given a small quiz about what they just saw, what they just about learned about. They actually answer the quiz. It goes to a central system that then keeps some information about that. Now, that would be cool if that were the end of the story, but it goes a little bit further. There's a customer mode to this, so they can turn around and show the mobile device to the customer and say, would you like to learn about this chainsaw? Here you go. And they can hand that off. It doesn't score or record that, but it's a great resource for them to use on the job. Now, if that were the end of the story, that would be great. But all employees at Home Depot have their own intranet. There's computer terminals stationed throughout the store that you go into, and it's called My Apron, accordingly, the orange apron. So they can walk over there. There's a leaderboard. And there are points assigned for how much product knowledge they actually consume. There are incentives and rewards and a competitive scoreboard for what they learn. Now, again, this is kind of an extreme case and a cool case. You think, how do we apply this to what we do? Well, remember, the IBM model, we're trying to get people loaded with the information that they need so that when they come to a session, they're prepared with some great information to really go to the next level. So that'll transition us into mobile a little bit. Now, I did a macro study for Training Magazine last year on the training top 125 companies. So these are companies that stand out amongst their peers, the 125 top companies. And it's interesting. Some of your companies, because I noticed there are insurance companies in there, may be on that list. And it's a competition. So what I did was when people enter this program to be judged in the top 125, they actually fill out almost like a doctoral dissertation level application form to join. And it talks about their strategies around all kinds of things. Mobile learning is being one of them. Their use of gamification being another. And those factor in certain ways, and they can use it. The sad part of that is most people who see the final list of the top 125 never see what these guys had to say. So they hired me to come in and do a macro study of what they were doing. And I noticed when it got to the mobile section, I started rating how people were using it. So again, this is information you can use from where you are. It ties in with my experience at WestJet, sitting in the bus with the shuttle full of people heading to training, saying we want to see more video. Video on demand. I can go in and I can learn. So similar to the Home Depot, but maybe a little bit more self-driven. Podcasts, case studies, self-assessments, just going in and rating myself and seeing how I compare to others, or seeing where my deficiencies are, what things I can fill in to become an expert or proficient person where I am. And we're going to see a couple examples of this, but ebooks, audiobooks, job aids. Okay, again, this is all this stuff around mobile tends to lean towards that 70% bracket, not to the 10%. Although when you do get down here, there are some support things around classroom sessions, like I want the class handouts. I want to be able to call them up on my mobile device anytime, anywhere. So there's an overlap too, which is great, and that's what we want to build on. Now, this is from that same infographic by Xyleme, but from a different data source. This is from Burson. And you can tell me if this is your experience. Well, let's do a little poll again, question with our hands, with the hand raising. So we've got it all cleared out there. How many of you in your regular learning and training sessions are using, or have integrated or using mobile at any level? Go ahead and let's answer that up.
Mobile.
Raise your hand. Yeah, I'm using mobile as either part of the classroom or but just using mobile to reach the people you're training or the learners that are working with you.
Looks like 14%. Wow.
You know that, and that's interesting. And Sandra, you were at our session a week ago where we asked that same question. It was a very small number on top.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the interesting challenge. Okay, this is from a article called "Redefining Priorities to Keep Up with the Modern Learner," and I have seen this everywhere I go. But it seems like as learning professionals, we're a little bit slow to get on board with this. It says the challenge is the modern learner is distracted, overwhelmed, and impatient.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could ask if you all agree with that. You probably, a lot of you would say, yeah, we're seeing that. I get what you're talking about. 54% of learners want mobile content. However, only 12% of content is mobile enabled. So you guys, you're tracking with that a little bit. It's like, now this is about content, not about organizations using mobile, but it's a small percentage that are doing that. So I love the commentary here. One of the biggest ironies is that learners tell us they only have 1% of their work week to dedicate to training, yet nearly 50% of learners spend 30 minutes or more every day on unofficial, unscheduled, and impromptu learning. And then I love their ugh. What do learners want? Well, they clearly don't want formal training on their tablets and phones. So again, that's the misnomer, I think. I think learning professionals tend to think, oh, okay, I either need to deliver in a classroom or on mobile, and that's not the case. What they're asking for is short form learning content like checklists, scannable articles, short videos, simple quizzes. See the distinction?
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for you to kind of to make maybe help them get along quicker in what they're doing, get up to speed, and you can by design start to do this as a way to, if you think of that IBM model, you could actually have things that they can consume, whether it's on mobile or on some other things. And that's that pre-reading, scratch the pre. That's the any sort of video demonstrating something that you're not going to spend time in the classroom showing, but you're going to require as part of the course. So this becomes more of a blended learning approach. I won't spend a lot of time on these, but a couple quick examples. Using mobile for assessment. I was working with a trucking company that was using this approach. They would the truckers come to class, they learn things, but then they take an online assessment. Now the way they do that is through mobile. So just in a quick and efficient way for delivery. Every single one of their truck drivers have mobile. Not very many of them have a desktop that's dedicated for learning. So it was a means to an end. Now hopefully they're not taking the mobile assessment while driving. I didn't ask that question, but it just shows an example of a great way to use mobile. Here's another one. The example is easily absorbed, but you can use it in different settings. Okay, so because I don't know if any of you are pregnant out there. That's not really the point. It's more of the structure of this. But there's this thing called Text for Baby. You sign up for it, and in your mobile device, it asks the person, well, so when are you due? They fill in the due date, and it ripples backwards, and it sets up an entire learning plan for that expectant mother. It knows the right time to introduce things over a time-based period. So it's not trying to say, hey, come to a learning session at the beginning of your pregnancy. We'll tell you everything you need to know about dealing with pregnancy and how to get through things and get the materials, things you need. It's laid out for them in a nice sequential pattern. Now I'll generalize that a little bit. Apply that to onboarding. Imagine that you say, okay, in the first week of your employment, we want you to pick up certain things. Lay that out as a schedule. Set up a series of mobile events that can actually help do that. It's just a great different way, another channel of handling things that aren't just stuffed into a classroom.
A couple of quick questions,
Please.
Brian. So we had a comment about, they try to do some things on mobile and they get pushback. Have you seen that in your experience where learners don't really want to open up their phone to learning experiences like on the job kind of a thing?
Yeah, and that's, again, I think you can deal with learning styles. Mm-hmm. Consider learning style as being as the fact that I want to read something or watch a video, mm-hmm. but think about the fact that you can accommodate learning styles of that impatient learner. And it doesn't mean you can't make it available somewhere else, not on the phone. Mm-hmm. It could be part of, and if you are using for your classroom sessions, if you're using some sort of a support technology around that to say, okay, when we open up a classroom, here's all your resource files, here's all the things you have. You can use it without having a specially designated mobile platform or through your learning management system. There are ways to do this. It's just another way of offering up content. And what it means for the learning professional is that saying, you know, hey, a PDF file sometimes is very readable by a mobile device. A piece of video is, but there may be something that's very complicated, used only in the classroom. That's, you know, you're not going to try to push that to video. But the idea when you get pushback is the idea, if you're getting a pushback from your broader base learning community, yeah, I would then shift that way. But I think it's interesting because that's not what we're seeing with the learners. We're seeing more and more in all kinds of situations. I worked with a group that called Barbary that prepares people to take the bar exam. And they're coming out of these classes where they learn to prepare for the bar exam, but they're saying, hey, but you know, we sometimes don't have the time to apply to that. So can you give us things that will help us prepare that are different and around that? And the mobile device became a key driver.
So, and also you showed a QR code on a couple slides ago, and Doris is asking, are they really even used a lot? I mean, we used to see them a lot years ago, and now you know, we just rarely see them. What's the status of QR codes?
That was from that specific trucking example, and I don't even know if the QR code is still active. If it is, you could try it. But the idea here, they printed them in their student guides. So it was just because, remember, these were the truckers that they're not on they're not on a learning system where they're actually walking through the steps of a course. They're actually told, hey, you know, when you get to this in your student manual, just take your phone, pop it, boom, and you open it up. So I think QR codes are an accessibility means for certain situations. I'm seeing less and less use of them because they've become so cliche. I mean, you walk through TSA now. TSA, the first thing you see when you clear security at the airport is they got their QR code.
Isn't it just a link? It's just a link to a website usually when you do QR codes. I mean, that's all it really is.
It is. In this case with the trucking example, what was interesting, again, it took them to the first page of their exam, I think how valuable that is. They don't have to open up their phone, say, oh, I got to go to the trucking company website, I got to go to the learning portal, I got to find the course. It just took them right there. So it was I think it was a smart use in what they did. It's not something that I think is universally needed to be used, but it's there, and it can be used for its own benefit and advantage. But you're right, it may be a little cliche, or because they're everywhere. They're on cups at fast food restaurants. You know, hey, click on the QR code and we'll talk to you about our new promotion. So it kind of got lost in the mix, I think, a little bit. Here's an important one. If you're doing classroom training especially, okay, this is sad. This is so sad. I mean, this is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. This is research-based, and it says, on day one, immediately after your learners walk out of a course, they have 100, you know, they remember the things you said. 20 minutes later, it's dropping to 58%. You know, 1 hour drops more. 31 days, they remember 21% of what you said. This is the idea that it's great to think of structured learning. Structured learning is important. It's so important, and I do not want to de-emphasize it. Say everything should be informal. But think about how much leakage there is in the bucket. That's what this is. There's leakage that occurs, and so it really drops off. Now, the correction is something called intervention spacing, and it says, okay, we have a course on a topic that we run our people through that lasts for 3 days. And so what happens is you can actually map or plan different interventions that happen after learning and that can occur over time. Now, that's again where some companies I've worked with have used mobile to a very creative advantage. What they do is they schedule a mobile reminders and refocusing. The example I'm going to show you is specifically a case study. So it's not just like, hey, I'm going to send you a little blurb or a little article to read or something. It's now again, I'm using some dated stuff here. I got BlackBerry going here, but this principle holds true. It was the only great slide I had that showed it. And not, I didn't make it up. It was actually from a real course. But it actually, so let's say 30 days after the session ends, and this was a course on financial planning, you get a personalized email. Hey, Sharon Rose, here's a scenario. What's the answer? So it's a simple story problem multiple choice type question. But the important thing is it also had, so you read, recall, respond, and then there's feedback. So it says, remember, hey, Mary's income, and so it's refocusing on the case study side of this course session. And I think that's the key. I mean, that's again, think of that's a great way with mobile. You're not going to most likely pull them back into the classroom. So you've lost them as soon as they walk out the door. And if we really do care about what they're remembering, mobile is a possible great way to do follow-up. There's other things you can do, polling and surveying. We're coming up to I know we have a little bit of time here. I only have a few slides on these last few, but I wanted to just kind of point out you can get beyond just that structured session. So social and collaborative, a little misunderstood in some organization, and tends to be in our technologies. It makes it kind of difficult because we can attach a discussion group to a course, perhaps in our learning management system, or some groups I've worked with have even set up private Facebook groups or private LinkedIn groups to use as social, just as a way to rally people in the classroom or people who are going through the same experience. We're starting, however, to see some really great ways of doing this a little bit more focused. So this is an example where Skype has been embedded inside of this course so that at the right point of the course delivery, this course that I'm showing, it's specifically for about 60 individuals, but they have breakout groups with 8 people, 8 to 10 people typically. And what they do is they basically have designed into their training a point where we want you to meet and work as a small team. So they group them together in a study group. And what happens is the collaborative session just launches right to Skype. There's a scheduling component to it because it uses Skype Business. But now you can use Skype, meet as a team of 6. But the whole point and purpose is that you have a specific objective for the social learning. It's not just a discussion board that says, hey, if you want to talk about the class, here's a place to do that, and here's some threads. It's literally built directly into the flow of the course. So it says there are points where we want you to communicate. Now, in this case with this client, they actually also wanted to track how much participation occurs, and they actually give participation points, which can become a gamification type of technique as well. It's a motivation technique to get involved, get engaged, have interaction with others. Here's a portal from Motorola. The thing is, it's their community directory, and they have focused learning communities. Now, one of the things that I've highlighted here in the middle, it says start a new community. Right on their community page where you have these learning community groups, anyone can start a learning community, and that sounds so dangerous. But I thought it was real interesting. The person who I worked with there actually has a definition for a Motorola knowledge community, and it actually totally mirrors what we've seen from a research perspective about what makes a social community work. It is focused on a specific topic. It's not general or broad-based. It has a passionate leader. So often in these social groups, either the instructor is the moderator or the kind of the leader of the group, or in the case of those breakout study sessions, they would actually designate in class. They would designate a moderator leader. They said, so you're kind of in charge of this. This is your baby for this activity or this breakout session. But they also they promote it. They have a statement of purpose. They also share learning resources through it, make an electronic home base of materials, maintain a library of related materials, links. But you see what it takes to do a social community. And you think, again, remember that number on the actuals was very low on social. And the idea here is not to make it too complicated, but really think about when your learners need to collaborate. Now, if you think back to that IBM model, the whole center section where they learn expert level, high level skills is when they finally get to the collaboration, because they learn the facts and concepts on the outside ring. They have opportunities to practice in the middle ring, and then the focus shifts to getting together, to connecting, to socializing. And so I think as trainers, our lesson learned is if we think of our learning as not just a bucket that starts at point A, ends at point B, we throw it all at them, we're done. if we think of it as the fact that we're gradually taking them out into higher level abilities, we're taking them toward social. And I only have a few slides on each of these because of time today. And I know I'm covering a lot of things, but we could take any one of these and make it a full topic. And I think the idea here is just to get thinking about what you can do outside. Now, analytics is something that's often talked about. And in fact, I did a keynote speech at Question Mark User Conference, and there was a person at a table right before I went on stage from Farmers Insurance. And they were talking about how in their learning group, they have made a major shift toward, kind of finding that intersection between learning, data, and analytics. Is it moving the needle at our organization? Is it helping anything? And so I think it's interesting that, the whole analytics shift and movement. And the one thing I wanted to point out here, it's finding meaningful patterns in data. Now, as learning professionals, we generate a lot of data. We're testing our users. We are measuring performance-based skills that they're doing. For our organizations, we are right on the front line of collecting that kind of data. But what do we do with it? Now, again, this is a busy shock and awe slide here, but if we look at the learning ecosystem, there are lots of places we're picking this up. Some of us are doing competency management, gap analysis, social learning or participation, tracking usage of informal learning. So there's a lot of data collection points where things are happening in our systems. Or I noticed this upcoming webinar on making compliance and regulatory training attractive because it's sort of dry and boring. That's still data. And but those data points, we're collecting a lot of it, and through our learning systems, we do a lot of that. Now consider visualizing that or tying that to key data. So here's a report that comes out of a learning management system that basically says, all right, the blue bars show when training was delivered, and the red bar shows, the lines show different incidents of reported safety violations. So notice again, when the training is front-loaded, this is an interesting, meaningful pattern that this group picked up. When the training is front-loaded, accidents start occurring toward the end of the year. When it's distributed over time, when instead of doing all compliance training at one time, we're spreading it out through the year, it brings those incidents down. Again, it's that meaningful pattern. It's trying to say, is what we're doing making a difference? And so there's a little close-up of that. Again, you get the idea, so I don't want to belabor that. Just sometimes even quick gauges. How are we? Are we getting our training done? Now, I equate that, some of you may have billboards like this where you are. Sometimes analytics is as simple, the person from Farmers said, there are so many key analytics we could try to attach data to. Where do we start? And the answer, I already had it in my slide deck for the keynote, was look at the most meaningful metrics. The billboards that many of us have around where we are. It shows the local hospital and what the waiting time looks like, and the number changed. That's a digital board where it changes over time. That's a meaningful number. But the interesting thing is they present that to not only the people on the road, so they know that it's a marketing PR thing, but it's also a challenge. It's a gauntlet set up for learners, or not in this case learners, but for the efficiency of those working behind the scenes. Now, again, I'm not going to go through these a lot, but behind the scenes, there's lots of things that they're tracking. They're tracking all kinds of information about what does the wait time look like, and they can go to different times of day. They can see how it was staffed for that time. Well, if you start to do that from a learning perspective and really focus on what needle with our training are we trying to move? Is it closures and sales? Is it an increased customer satisfaction response? I've seen that done with training. There are a number of ways to do that. Last area is gamification. I literally only have one slide here, but because what's interesting is if you've ever seen a demo of a learning technology that has gamification, right now it's looking a little cheesy, a little bit corny. It's the idea that you can assign points for doing learning activities, and there's badges that appear, and then there's a leaderboard showing who's doing well. I don't think that's really the intent and purpose of where all of this is going. It's really a way to start marking achievement. We want our learners to understand you're engaging in training and courses, but we also want you to know that you are achieving things over time. So I thought it was interesting. I pulled this out of One Learning Management System. There's a tab called Accomplishments. And I didn't have this rest of the screenshot on it, but if you click on Accomplishments, you'll see a list of different things that they did that were some of them were very performance based. And so associating one-to-one with those things is very good. Remember the Khan Academy, I forgot I do have a couple slides here. Khan Academy breaks it out so they show mastery at every level. And I think ultimately learners really what they want to know is, what don't I know? What are the skill sets that I'm engaging in here? And that's often lost in a course. A typical 2-day, 3-day, or longer course, there's just so many things that are covered that I never even really know what I was supposed to know. So I think the message here is communicating that to your users. It's a great gamification technique. And they even do have gamification badges in Khan Academy. But the idea is, how do we tie this to rewards? To learning reporting, let me see how I'm doing. That's what the learner wants to know. Aggregate reporting, how am I doing against the larger group? And then connecting that with performance when you can. I think those are the key aspects of that. Now, we're about to the top of the hour. I wanted to put this chart up, and it is my second to the last slide, I think. So, but the idea here is I'm part of the group called the E-Learning Manifesto, and I dropped the E off there in my animation. But I think the message is what's the most important. Many of our courses today are these things. They're focused around a set of content. They're efficient for the developer instructor because if I group it together and bucket it together, I can get it out there. They're attendance driven. Yeah, you read all of these. They're based on facts. All of these things are what describe, or characteristics that describe a typical learning experience. Serious e-learning is trying to say, as trainers, as learning professionals, can we get to the point where we're focused more on performance? We're doing things that are meaningful to the learner. We have realistic decision making as part of the whole process. In support of the flipped classroom, instead of being everything shifted to the instructor's side, what about the guide mentor role of being there to help them through rather than to present or lecture? Again, a continuous learning instead of everything being in one bucket. This is sort of summarizes everything I just said in terms of what we're trying to do from a learning side. It's more than just the mechanics of breaking content into little pieces. It's how do we do spaced practice. That all has to do with following up, not letting the learning curve, the forgetting curve, get involved. Learners as contributors rather than just consumers. So again, this is a chart. When you download the deck, put this up. The people who created it are very brilliant folks, and I'm one of the team of 32 that is on the board for this, but there were 5 individuals who put it together. They said in their webinar when talking about it, don't try to attack everything at once, but pick one, pick 2, and start working on it. That's the challenge. This is my last slide, is the call to action. And you can see some of the things here. Just don't be afraid to try blending technologies in different channels. Expand your channels with meaning and purpose. And I'm going to keep this up as my final slide, and I think I'll wrap up right there.
Brian, thank you so much. Before you dash off, please do me a favor. Share in the question box your key takeaway. What are you going to do? What was so insightful for you that's going to change your behavior and the way that you approach developing learning for your organization? Share that in the question box. If you've got some extra time, stick around. Brian is going to answer questions after we turn off the recording. Brian, I want to thank you for an outstanding session today. This was just amazing. So much to think about and kind of reorganize what we should be doing going forward. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.